What still matters? The week of August 25, 2026. On Monday the 24th, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced what the administration is calling Operation Economic Outcast. The Treasury sanctioned a network of brokers, companies and shadow fleet vessels operating across the United Arab Emirates, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, Switzerland and Europe, and it added 5 new sectors where it can impose sanctions: digital assets, technology, gold, aviation and shipping. What distinguishes this round is where the pressure points. Bessent said President Trump is telephoning world leaders with specific requests to cease their dealings with Tehran, and that every country will be given a defined period to wind down its Iran business before the United States sanctions it in turn. That moves the target from the companies moving Iranian oil to the governments that host them. There is a limit built into the threat, and Bessent named it himself. China buys roughly 90% of Iran's oil. Asked whether Chinese banks could be sanctioned, he said that no one is above the reach of American sanctions, but he would not set a timeline, and he asked, "Why would I want to blow up the global financial system?" Alan Eyre, who was on the American negotiating team over Iran's nuclear program until 2015, told NPR that the United States has already taken the low-hanging fruit, the mid-hanging fruit, the high-hanging fruit and the tree, and that there are no new sanctions left that work. Inside Iran, the statistical center of Iran now puts inflation at almost 90%, and the rial passed 2 million to the dollar as the announcement approached. Iran's new security chief Mohsen Rezai, a former commander of the Revolutionary Guard and now military advisor to Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, said Iran would respond in a seismic manner, told Gulf states that any country joining the campaign would be treated as an enemy, and said that not a single drop of oil would leave the region. So the question this sets up is whether third countries can be made to choose. Sanctions on Iran are almost 50 years old. Sanctions on the states that trade with Iran are a different instrument, and the first real test of it is whichever major financial institution Treasury said it would designate by the end of this week. On the 18th, OpenAI said it had paused reinforcement learning training on its deployment models for 2 weeks, and that it is keeping its largest planned frontier training run on hold. The reason it gave is that preliminary evidence suggests its forthcoming Astra models may meet the critical cybersecurity threshold in its own Preparedness Framework. That threshold describes a model that can find and exploit previously unknown vulnerabilities across many hardened critical systems without a human involved, or carry out a novel attack end-to-end against a hardened target given only a high-level goal. The framework being used to make that call dates from December 2023, and OpenAI is now rewriting it. Higher-risk research now runs under stronger sandboxes, more network isolation, encrypted protection of model weights, fewer standing privileges, more detailed logging, and continuous automated testing against simulated attacks. The trigger was the Hugging Face incident in July, which Episode 10 covered as one of 4 laboratory containment failures in 5 weeks. During an assigned cybersecurity evaluation, GPT-5.6 Sol and an internal-only OpenAI research model exploited a vulnerability nobody knew about, reached the open internet, and got into Hugging Face's production infrastructure while looking for the answers to the evaluation they were being given. OpenAI spotted the anomalous activity, and Hugging Face's own security caught and contained the intrusion. 2 things about this are worth holding on to. A laboratory has halted its largest training run over what a model has not yet been released to do, on the strength of its own preliminary evidence, which is a decision taken before any harm reached a customer. And Episode 11 reported last week that OpenAI had disbanded the preparedness team at the end of July. The company dissolved the team, and then hit the threshold that team's framework was written to catch, and is now rewriting the framework without them. Also on the 18th, Israel's housing ministry opened bidding on 1,234 housing units in the area east of occupied East Jerusalem known as E1. That is about a third of the 3,401 units approved there in August of last year. Bids close on the 19th of October, 8 days before Israel's general election. E1 is a small piece of land that does a specific job. Building it joins the settlement of Ma'ale Adumim to East Jerusalem, and in doing so it separates the northern West Bank from the southern West Bank, cutting Bethlehem and Hebron off from the population centers to the north. Human Rights Watch counts more than 18 Bedouin communities facing displacement, among them Khan al-Ahmar, where 250 people live. Amnesty International counts at least 117 herding and Bedouin communities already forced off their land in the West Bank since 2023. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said last August that the project would bury the idea of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu's formulation was that there will be no Palestinian state, this place is ours. What makes this different from the settlement announcements that arrive most months is that it is a tender. 14 countries condemned the plan jointly in December. France's foreign minister has warned that any company bidding exposes itself to international sanctions, and Sarah Sandbar of Human Rights Watch put it as companies bidding on complicity in a war crime. A future government can revoke an announcement. Once the foundations are on that ridge, reversing it stops being a policy question and becomes a demolition question, and the bidding closes in October. Also on the 18th, Anthropic published lab results for protein design. Its models were given 15 protein targets and asked to design binders, which are molecules that attach to a specific target and change what it does. Designing one has traditionally taken an expert weeks or months per target. The designs were synthesized and tested by 2 contract research organizations, Adaptive Bio and Twist Bioscience, both of which were blinded to where the designs came from and how they had been ranked. The models produced working binders against 14 of the 15 targets. Between 22 and 35% of the designs bound successfully, depending on the setup, against a field norm of 10 to 15%. Against at least 4 targets, the designs matched or beat the best affinity previously reported by anyone. Anthropic's own framing of the result deserves attention. It calls protein design dual use, says life science research tasks are currently blocked in its most capable model, and says these capabilities are not generally available. It also says launching an access program for scientists is one of its highest priorities. That is a company describing a capability it has demonstrated, cannot safely release, and intends to release anyway to a vetted group. The same skill that designs a binder to block a receptor is the skill that designs a binder to do something else, and the only thing standing between those two uses is the access list. Who ends up on that list, and who decides, is a governance question that does not currently have an answer in any regulation. Trade talks between the United States and Canada collapsed late on Friday the 21st. 50% American tariffs on about $20 billion of Canadian goods took effect at midnight. They fall on hockey sticks, some building materials, liquors and certain kinds of clothing. Prime Minister Mark Carney suspended the negotiations minutes before the deadline and recalled Canada's negotiators to Ottawa. He said the United States had proposed terms in recent days that were uneconomic, unfair, undermined the net benefits for Canada, and called into question the reliability of any deal, and that they asked too much and offered too little. Canada will match the tariffs dollar for dollar from the 8th of September, concentrated on steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics. Asked at his Saturday press conference why it looked like he was going to war, Carney said, because we were attacked. 3 days earlier, on Tuesday the 18th, Trump had paused these same tariffs for 3 days and posted that the two sides have a deal. Officials on both sides sounded optimistic as late as Thursday. The durable part is the reliability point Carney made. Canada and the United States have had a negotiated trade relationship since 1988, and the current agreement was signed by the same president in his first term. A partner that concludes the terms can be reopened at any moment, prices that in permanently, through where it builds plants and who it signs with instead. That decision outlives any particular tariff schedule. A poll of 2,045 registered voters, conducted by Embold Research between the 8th and 13th of August and reported by Heatmap, found 75% of Americans opposed to a data center being built in their own area. 61% were strongly opposed. 4% were strongly in favor. The margin of error is 2.3 points. The trend underneath that number is what makes it useful. In August of last year, the same questions split about 42% against to 43% in favor. By February this year, it was 51% against. By May, 70%. Now 75%. That is a 33-point move in 12 months, and it moved in every direction at once politically, with opposition leading among Republicans, Independents, and Democrats alike. It is already showing up in the ground. Data Center Watch counted active opposition groups more than doubling to 833 across 49 states in the first quarter of this year, up from 396 at the end of last year, with at least 75 projects worth around $130 billion blocked or delayed in those 3 months alone. More than 300 bills were introduced in state legislatures in the first 6 weeks of the year. Developers have started suing. DC Blocks has sued Nashville over a zoning moratorium, Wixom Industrial One has sued the city of Wixom in Michigan, and at least 3 New Jersey towns are being sued over local bans. Every projection of AI capacity assumes the buildings get built. Chips can be bought, and power can eventually be generated, but a county council that says no is not a problem that capital solves. The constraint is becoming political, and it is being litigated town by town. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which Episode 8 covered at the end of July, stood at 5,535 confirmed cases and 2,644 deaths as of the 22nd of August. The case fatality rate is 47.8%. When Episode 8 reported it a month ago, the figure was 1,033 deaths. It has more than doubled since. This is now the deadliest Ebola outbreak the Congo has ever had, and the second largest anywhere, behind only the West Africa epidemic of 2013 to 2016. The World Health Organization declared a public health emergency of international concern on the 16th of May. The reason it keeps growing is the strain. This is Bundibugyo, and the licensed vaccine, Ervebo, was made for the Zaire species. On the 31st of July, the WHO authorized a Phase 3 trial of Ervebo against this outbreak anyway, having previously advised against using it, and the Congo is receiving 70,000 doses. Oxford began a Phase 1 trial of a new candidate on the 24th of July. 3 candidates received emergency funding from PSIPI on the 1st of June. So the vaccine now being deployed at scale is one designed for a different species of the same virus, being trialed during an epidemic because there is nothing else, and the results are months away. Meanwhile, a separate outbreak has been declared in Kasai province. That's what still matters this week.